Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sarah Fields. I am one of three deputy directors here with the City of San Jose Housing Department. And this afternoon, we're going to be looking at two different incentive programs that are meant to encourage housing production both across San Jose in targeted geographies, as well as in a downtown corridor. There will be a brief presentation from our director, Eric Sullivan, and then an opportunity for questions and answers towards the end of the presentation. I'm joined by two of my colleagues in our production division, Chelsea Bass and Constantine Vorin. And they'll also be on hand to answer questions. So please, throughout the presentation, feel free to use the Q&A function in the webinar to type in your questions, and then we'll have the opportunity to read the questions and answer them towards the end of this presentation. With that, I will hand it over to our director, Eric, to present some slides. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. And so, Jose, I want to bring up the presentation, and we'll go through two sets of incentives that we're bringing forward to council on January 27th, which we're calling Housing Day because we're bringing forth a number of different policies to further our three areas of focus within the housing department. One is, how do we get to more production, which is what these two slides speak to. Two is preservation of units. We're going to be talking through a pilot program on January 27th to preserve units through a pilot program under our soft story retrofits. Then three, tenant protections, which we'll talk to a bunch of tenant protection rights that we're going to be instituting into a number of our ordinances in the rent stabilization program. But for the purposes of this presentation today, we're talking about the production side and how do we incentivize more market rate housing production with deed restricted affordable units in San Jose. And so the first slide here, go to the next slide, please. So the first is the incentive programs. As I mentioned, this one that we're first going to talk about is for multifamily housing production, which is primarily those projects within our growth areas and urban villages throughout the city. Both incentive programs are designed to catalyze projects that have been sitting on the books or sitting as applications for a couple of years into construction. Globally, I'll share with you, as we've done extensive analysis regarding the productivity of the inclusionary housing program projects, we looked back about 5 or 6 years and found that just 10% of projects that are submitted for application actually move into production and construction. And so we're trying to devise different strategies to figure out ways to get more projects to go into production in order to create more housing units. And so the multifamily housing program focuses, as I mentioned, in our urban areas and our urban villages throughout the city. And then we have a downtown incentive program that'll be an add-on to the existing downtown program by allowing for conversions from office into housing. Next slide. So we'll begin with that multifamily housing incentive program. Okay, next slide. So first, as I had mentioned, some of the key findings of this program. When we first brought this program forward last year, we focused on underwriting some key projects that demonstrated by waiving and providing these incentives, we can catalyze projects into production. And so with that, we got units into production. And then earlier at the end of last year in December, we brought forth to council an overall cost of residential development study. And what that study found was that in general, it is difficult to bring out projects that are podium builds and towers There are some projects, stat flats and townhomes, that are able to move forward in the current economic environment. But overall, we needed to find ways to foster incentives to move more projects forward. And so part of the cost of redevelopment study also touched on the fact that, in general, one of our other challenges within the market rate production is that our rents are generally below that of our comparable cities in Silicon Valley. And so here presents an opportunity through the multifamily housing program, or otherwise referred to as MHIP, to try to catalyze more projects into production. Next slide. So here is the quick update on those projects we were able to move forward. And what this slide demonstrates is these incentive programs are doing as what we intended. They're catalyzing projects forward, as we've gotten over 1,400 units into production across 5 projects, including over 225 affordable units being produced. Next slide. And so what we're looking to do now is to take that existing incentive package that was created under what we referred to as the phase 1 component, which was a heightened set of incentives as opposed to the phase 2, and I'll discuss that later. And we're looking to extend out that phase 1 incentive. And with that, we're looking to, and so we have already underwritten additional projects that I will speak to later. So we're keeping the core components of the existing project and just extending out the deadline. Next slide. And so the phase 2 benefits, as I mentioned, phase 1, creating a termination date for projects that don't move forward by February of 2027. They would then enter the phase 2 benefits, which provides additional incentives, but at just a lower rate, both in the amount of construction taxes, taking it from 50% down to 25% and only applying it to the BNS, or Buildings and Structure Tax, as opposed to the Buildings and Structure Tax and the CRMP tax. And then the eligibility of projects then continues. So the goal here is to make it time limited, to extend out the existing phase 1, because as you'll see in the next slide here, we're confident we can move more projects into production, given some of the challenges of the fiscal environment. And so what you'll see on this slide here is these are the projects we have underwritten. We think by extending out the phase 1 incentives to the new date of February of 2027, we'll be able to move another 2,000 or over 2,000 units into production, getting another over 100 affordable deed-restricted units out of these projects. Next slide, please. And so now I'm going to transition into the other part of this incentive program, which is our downtown residential incentive program. And this, as I had mentioned at the top, is taking the existing program that we have for new construction and adding a feature to it to allow for office to residential conversions. So next slide. So right now, as I referenced, in the cost of residential development study, we looked at the challenges of building towers and podium builds within downtown. The current fiscal environment makes it incredibly challenging. And because of COVID, in our downtown, we have an environment has been fostered of high office vacancies. And so now we're trying to figure out, how do we get more activity within our downtown? How do we take advantage of that vacant existing real estate that exists that was originally offices and converted into that was originally offices and converted into residential? Part of that conversion process is looking at what's the feasibility of conversions. It doesn't apply universally to all office environments. So if you go back to, you're able to pull down the December cost of residential development study, you'll see a pretty extensive analysis that went into deciding how best to approach this incentive program, building on and learning from other cities that are able to incentivize some of these conversions? And then how do we do that applicable to San Jose? And what we found based on that analysis is that we can get up to about 500 units by offering this incentive in downtown. Next slide, please. And so the first phase that's being offered is targeting about 500 units that we've underwritten, and we'll show we've got a couple of projects that we looked at that we know are going to be able to move forward. And what the incentive is a waiver of construction taxes. It's a continuing waiver of the inclusionary housing fees by eliminating the in lieu fee and targeting 5% of affordable deed restricted units, and then a reduction in the parks fees by 50%. Similar to the construction of the multifamily housing incentive program, we're breaking this out into two phases. Phase one will have a deadline of pulling projects by December 2026. Phase two, after that December deadline, will then offer a 50% reduction in construction taxes, and then similar inclusionary fees, and then only a 30% reduction in the park fees. And our minimum floor for these conversions of office to residential is to have at least 20 units created through the conversion. The intentionality here, as mentioned at the top of the program, is to take advantage of that existing real estate that is in downtown today, that is sitting vacant under office use, and to convert that into residential units, meeting San Jose's need for more abundant housing stock, and two, creating more activity within our downtown. Next slide, please. And so, as we looked at this analysis, we found some interesting things that tracked along the findings of the cost of residential development study in December, with the key being that our rents for fully market rate buildings throughout the city continue to be low, very low comparative to our neighboring municipalities. And so, as we looked at projects that will be converted from office into residential, we're finding that the majority of the rents are actually remaining quite affordable. And so, we're hopeful that these conversions will create more competition, adding new stock of housing units into downtown, and will encourage an increase in our strength of our residential environment in downtown. But for the time being, for these projected conversions, we're going to primarily get an overwhelming number of just affordable units, just given the low rent base for which these projects are experiencing in the downtown area. And so this slide shows where the projects are that we underwritten, where their coming rents are for studios, one bedrooms, and two bedrooms. And then on the right-hand side in the gold, you will see here's where the affordability triggers are under area median income for 110% under the state's limits. And you'll see that as an example, the studio rents, based on what they think they can get in the market, are coming in far below those AMI levels. So these projects, a majority of all of these projects, their studios are actually tracking closer to 100% AMI or lower, as are one bedrooms, and then some of the two bedrooms. Next slide, please. And so as we look at the projected production of this incentive program, we see the total amount of potential waivers to be just about $16 million in total value, putting an investment per unit at just about $26,000, which compared to other production incentive programs or loan programs or grant programs that the city operates through the housing department, this is a very cost-effective and efficient delivery of units. From that 16 million, we will get just over 600 middle-income households up to 110% AMI. And as I articulated in the previous slide, most of those rents are coming in at 100% AMI or lower. We'll also get deed restricted for long-term 5% of those units. So another 30 units that we're able to produce as affordable and affordable for the long term. in addition to improve property tax values as we're able to activate the existing vacant office space in our downtown environment. Next slide, please. And so that is the quick summary of our two projects of our two incentive programs that we are bringing forward, encompassing 5 to 10 projects that we foresee will advance the production of more housing in our multifamily areas and also in our downtown area by incentivizing office to residential conversions. And that's the quick summary for today. And now I think, Sarah, we're going to open it up to some questions and answers.
So thank you so much, Eric. So the first question will be, I think, a very easy question that even I can answer. The first question is, will these slides be made available after the meeting? The answer is yes. These slides will be available on the Housing Department website, as will a recording of this presentation and a transcript of this very meeting. That is the practice of all of our community engagement meetings that take place online. And there will be a link available to our social media and other channels as well. Okay, the next question, which I imagine will be fielded by one of my colleagues, what are the square footage of the units? I think this is getting into, are there minimum standards for bedroom size, for unit size, things like that. Maybe Eric, do you want to answer that?
So, Constantine, do you want to speak to those?
Yes, we've completed detailed underwriting of all projects that we're proposing to include in the program. I will be able to share the square footages and the rent levels for these projects, but I'm not going to be identifying the project themselves by name. But yeah, we have information that we can share with you after the meeting.
Great. Okay. Another question. There's a question about sort of the second phase of eligibility for the MIP, for the Multifamily Housing Incentive Program. The question is, one of the slides lists, or rather, here, let's see. I'm looking at the eligibility criteria on the MIP phase 2, and it reads, quote, projects on the approved eligible projects list. And the question is, how does a project fit on that list?
Chelsea, do you want to speak to that list, or Constantine?
I can speak to it, Eric. So when this program was originally put forth in December of 2024, there was an eligibility list as well as a updated eligibility list. If you are not on that list, you may reach out to myself or Constantine, and we can chat about your project and see if it meets the underlying requirements as well.
So just so we're all clear, that list is in no way closed, and there is an opportunity to get on that list continuing forward, or assuming there's an extension. Yes?
Correct. There are some other requirements. You have to be close to building permit. You have to have entitlements that are already approved before the end of December 2025, density requirements, location requirements. And if you believe that your project should be on that list, please reach out to myself and Constantine, and we can chat about whether or not your project meets those requirements and if it will meet the timing requirements for when it would be able to pull building permit as well.
Excellent. Okay, Chelsea, since you're unmuted, you just not fast enough. Okay, can you talk more about deed restrictions? This is sort of a more general question, I think, but what kind of deed restrictions are we talking about within these incentive programs, and what does that look like?
We're looking at 55-year deed restrictions. So that means that you are required to deed restrict those units at no more than the specific AMI levels that are selected, that are going to be at or below 110% AMI for a 55-year period. So that's kind of what we're looking for there. It's going to have income requirements as well as ongoing eligibility requirements.
And since this is such a broad question, maybe let's get in a little bit to who sets AMI and how is AMI determined?
The city relies on the California State Housing Community Development Department. Did I get that one right?
Housing and Community Development Department.
Thank you, guys. That releases those limits once annually. They do some minor adjustments to numbers that are released annually by the U.S. Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development.
Excellent. Okay, here's another question, also about the MIP, but it would actually, I think, apply to both of the incentive programs. This is sort of a process question. Does the city council need to approve specific projects or only the extension of the incentive program? And if it is the second one, who determines eligibility? Is it the housing department staff?
So I'll jump in here. So we have to bring so part of the process for eligibility within the program is one, the predetermined list for the downtown group, but others can be added. And then once the project is sufficiently ready to progress forward, we go forward with what's called the city subsidy review, which has to come before council to be formally admitted within the program, and then the project can move forward. So we do that for both the multifamily housing incentive program and the downtown program. And so as you can connect with Chelsea or Constantine to talk through kind of the mechanics and timing of that work. But the way it has and will continue to work is once we have a project that is ready to move forward, post the approval of the program, we bring individual projects or a grouping of projects back to council for admission into the program.
Okay, here is another question. Is this, are the two incentive programs only applying to rental property, or is there any for sale option within these projects?
Thanks, Sarah. I can take that one. Currently, the program is only open to rental opportunities, not for sale.
Okay, that's an easy one to answer. Can you share the prices for other units in any given development that are outside of the 5% of units at 110% AMI? What does the market rate price look like for a studio apartment, one bedroom, etc.? So I think this is trying to understand, what is the distinction between the deed restricted pricing and the market rate pricing? I don't know if we have those answers, but Constantine, I'll recognize you.
Yes, I can take this, and it really depends on the location of those projects because we have two programs, one that benefits projects in the downtown area, and we have a citywide project, which is a multifamily housing incentive program. But I think in general, if we're looking at rent levels for different unit types, I think we projecting based on the underwriting that we received from developers and our own rent surveys, that studios will be close to $2,800 per unit per month. One bedrooms will be at 3,300 units per unit per month. Two bedrooms at around like $4,400 to $4,500 per unit per month. And three bedrooms, which we're not going to have many of them, but it's going to be closer to $5,000 per unit per month.
Huh.
And again, those numbers are consistent with the middle income affordability band between like 80 to 120% AMI. So we believe that most units that will the proposed to be constructed under the two programs will be within the like 80 to 120% AMI range.
Excellent, thank you. Another question, probably prompted by the question about rental versus for sale, asking, will purchasing options be in the pipeline? I believe that this program will continue forward as a rental program. It is worth noting that, however, we do have for sale affordable options within our inclusionary housing ordinance, which is also coming before City Council, or rather, the proposals around the IHO, the inclusionary housing ordinance, will also be coming before council on January 27th, the same day as these two incentive programs. Eric, anything to add around purchasing options?
No, I think that about covers it. The target here is, as Chelsea had mentioned, how do we get to more rental production? There is no prohibition against home ownership, but these two incentive programs are around rental production, and there are other medians for incentivizing through the IHO our home ownership production. So if you have particular questions about that, please reach out to and connect with Chelsea or Constantine.
Excellent. And then just another question about sort of the mix of unit types within these incentive programs, probably prompted by Constantine starting to get into the rents and mentioning a limited number of 3-bedroom units. Someone asked, will there be any 4-bedroom units, and kind of what the mix of unit types are we'll see within these programs. And probably this is specific to the downtown, but interested in the multifamily as well.
Thank you, Sarah. Yes, currently we don't have any projects proposing 4-bedroom units in the rental developments. So I'm not going to be able to share information about square footages or like rents, but if I can leave a link in the comments here with our like city of San Jose income and rent limits. That's going to show rent limits for 4-bedroom units based on the AMI levels.
Okay. Thank you. Another question here, are any of the units in the planned pipeline below 80% AMI? Asking about 50% AMI in particular, and anything below that as well.
Can you clarify whether it questions about the pipelines under MIP and downtown or general city pipeline?
I think they're asking about the incentive program, but I think it's probably useful to ask the question that you're inferring.
Yeah, we do have like I can mention like there's one project that has been approved with the 50% AMI units, and the reason why the project proposed like lower income units is because they wanted to qualify for a density bonus to build more units on site. But in general, as we mentioned earlier, most units kind of comply with our ordinance, and they choose to provide the middle income rent limit units.
And then just to kind of expand on that, while these programs are really geared towards catalyzing and market rate development to move forward, the city of San Jose has many other funding sources that we use to catalyze affordable housing development to move forward, which does those 30, 50, 60 deeply affordable units. And we have over 1,000 units that are currently moving towards construction at those AMI levels, and more coming up because we have a few closings that are going to be occurring in the upcoming months.
Excellent. Thank you for adding that, Chelsea, and Constantine. Thank you for starting us off on that question. I'm seeing no other questions at this time, so I'll just say to the group, we appreciate you joining us. And if anyone has any additional questions, please feel free to reach out to us. We will have another session about the 2 incentive programs. It will be the same presentation. It will not be new information from today, but there will be another session in 2 weeks. Let's see, that's Thursday the 22nd. So if you have colleagues who weren't able to join us today, who would like to join for that session, or you think of additional questions, you're obviously welcome to join us again. But like I said, this session will be posted online probably early next week, as will the transcript and the presentation slides. And this is all leading up towards Housing Day. That's January 27th with the City Council, where we will be hearing the inclusionary housing ordinance, these 2 incentive programs, the mobile home rent ordinance, as well as a soft story pilot program, will all be coming before City Council. Again, that's Tuesday, January 27th, Housing Day, and I expect we'll see many of you there. With that, I will say thank you very much to everyone, and please be in touch with questions or further points to clarify. And take care, everyone. Happy New Year.